This free Negro population comprised all sorts of conditions, from planters who themselves owned Negroes to day laborers in northern cities. Some had accumulated considerable property, while of course most lived from hand to mouth. Some acquired skill in trades, while the great majority contented themselves with the simplest kind of labor. Some outstanding figures appeared in spite of the fact that education unfortunately did not flourish. There was growing prejudice against it in the South and in the North, and such schools for Negroes as were in operation were located in the large cities. In spite of the fact, Negroes entered the professions. Occasionally there was a doctor, in James McCune Smith, trained in Glasgow, became quite famous. William Wells Brown, as novelist, historian, and traveler, made a name for himself. But the greatest advances were made by those Negroes laboring for the uplift of their race. Men like John B. Russwurm, who received an A.B. from Bowdoin, and the distinction of being the first Negro to achieve this prize, went into journalism and labored to stimulate race pride and desire for advancement. Russwurm began Freedom's Journal in 1827, at New York, and gradually other papers appeared. Then, too, there were organizers. The American Colonization Society had been active in a program to transport the Negroes back to Africa. For many of the Negroes who had enjoyed advantages, this was an undesirable policy, especially because of the loss of life which such a change entailed. So beginning in 1831, a national convention was held annually, starting with delegates from 5 states. They met to plan for Negro welfare and improve what conditions they could, and assembled with considerably regularity in the years prior to the Civil War. For the idea of colonization did not die out. Many Negroes were transported to Liberia, an African republic established for that purpose by Americans. Numerous individuals settled in Canada, and projects for colonization in the Niger Valley, Central America, and Haiti were undertaken by Negro leaders. Another group of Negroes interested in the welfare of their race were the propagandists for abolition, such as Charles L. Remond, and especially Frederick Douglass. Douglass was perhaps the foremost Negro of the middle century, and he cooperated actively with the white abolition leaders. He and those Negroes who had made successful advances aided greatly the propaganda of Garrison and other abolitionists, because they could point out the terrible sin of a bondage which was preventing millions from making the progress of which such men as Douglass proved they were capable. But here must be inserted a word of caution. All questions of progress are complicated by miscegenation. Many, but by no means all, of those who achieved distinction were partially of white blood. Religious and economic training. Even more successful in uplift work was the activity of religious organizations. The greatest advance in social organization made by the Negro was in religion. As noted above, there had been the obligation assumed by many of the whites to point out the road to salvation to the Negro. Religion and the church were very attractive to the Negro, especially when evangelical.